March 5th, 1770, King Street, Boston, 11 p.m. The temperature drops below freezing as snowflakes mix with something far more dangerous. Rage. A crowd surrounds 8 British soldiers. Shouts pierce the night. "Fire, damn you, fire!" Then, gunfire. 5 colonists lie dead or dying in the snow, their blood staining the cobblestones crimson. But here's what they don't tell you in history class. What if everything you know about that night is a lie? Because within days, an image appeared, an engraving so powerful, so perfectly crafted, that it would ignite a revolution. Not through truth, but through manipulation. The Boston Massacre wasn't just about bullets and blood. It was about something far more dangerous, the deliberate weaponization of narrative. We call it the Boston Massacre. But was it murder or self-defense? Was it tyranny or tragedy? The answer depends entirely on who's telling the story. And in 1770, someone was about to tell that story so effectively that an empire would fall. Think about the last time you saw a viral image online, how it spread, how it shaped opinion before anyone checked the facts. Now imagine that same power in 1770, when a single engraving could define reality for millions. That's exactly what happened. And the man behind it? A silversmith named Paul Revere. This isn't just history. This is the blueprint for every propaganda campaign that followed. Every single one. From wartime posters to political ads to the images flooding your social media feed right now. It all started here, on a frozen street in Boston, when someone realized that controlling the narrative meant controlling the revolution. So ask yourself, how many other facts of history were manufactured just as carefully? Stick with us, because what we're about to reveal will change how you see not just the American Revolution, but every news story, every viral moment, every carefully crafted image you've ever believed without question. The massacre lasted minutes. The propaganda war lasted years, and it's still being fought today. 3 weeks after the shooting, a print appears in shop windows across Boston. It's titled "The Bloody Massacre Perpetrated in King Street." You've probably seen it, the iconic image of British redcoats firing in perfect formation into a crowd of helpless civilians. It's also almost completely false. Paul Revere wasn't at the massacre that night. He didn't witness the chaos, the confusion, the terror. But he understood something far more valuable than truth. He understood optics. And he was about to create the most successful piece of propaganda in American history. Look at the image carefully. The British soldiers stand in a perfect line, like an execution squad. Their officer, Captain Preston, raises his sword as if commanding the slaughter. The colonists? Passive victims, arms raised in surrender. In the background, a sign reads, "Butcher's Hall," a subtle but devastating detail. Even the sky bleeds red. But here's what really happened that night. A mob of 300 to 400 colonists surrounded 8 terrified soldiers. They threw ice, rocks, oyster shells, clubs. They dared the soldiers to fire. One soldier was knocked down. In the chaos and confusion, without orders, the soldiers discharged their weapons. Captain Preston never gave the command to fire. Witnesses on both sides confirmed this. So why did Revere depict it as cold-blooded murder? Because truth doesn't start revolutions. Emotion does. The engraving went viral, 17th century style. Copies sold out within days. Revere made prints available for purchase. Others copied his design. And within weeks, the image had spread throughout all 13 colonies. Think about that. No internet, no television, no radio, just paper and ink and word of mouth. And yet this single image reached more colonists than any sermon, any pamphlet, any speech. Here's where it gets really interesting. Revere didn't even create the original design. He copied it from another artist, Henry Pelham, who was furious about the theft. But Revere's version reached the market first, and history remembers him, not Pelham. The lesson? In propaganda, speed matters more than originality. Being first with a narrative beats being accurate with the facts. Notice what's missing from Revere's engraving. The colonial mob, the weapons they wielded, The chaos and confusion that led 8 scared soldiers to pull their triggers. All erased. Revere understood that complexity doesn't mobilize people. Simplicity does. Good versus evil. Victim versus oppressor. Us versus them. And the colors, oh, the colors mattered. The hand-colored versions showed British redcoats, blood-red pavement, and even a red sky. Red became the color of tyranny. Blue, worn by some colonists, became the color of innocence. Color psychology in 1770. Brilliant. But Revere made one mistake that actually strengthened his propaganda. He included the name of the black man killed that night, Crispus Attucks, in the image. Some historians believe this was intentional, showing that British tyranny didn't discriminate, that this fight was everyone's fight. Even a free black man wasn't safe from the redcoats. Whether intentional or not, it broadened the appeal of the narrative. The engraving appeared alongside testimonies from witnesses, carefully selected testimonies that corroborated Revere's version. Pamphlets distributed the image with inflammatory text. The Boston Gazette published accounts describing the horrid massacre. All of it coordinated. All of it strategic. This wasn't spontaneous outrage. This was a calculated campaign. Want to know the scariest part? It worked perfectly. Within a month, colonists from Georgia to New Hampshire believed British soldiers had executed unarmed civilians in cold blood. The image became reality. The symbol became fact. And once that happened, there was no going back. Do you see it now? The playbook being written in real time? Control the image. Control the narrative. Control the emotion. Get there first. Keep it simple. Make it visual. Make it visceral. Make it spread. Paul Revere didn't just create an engraving, he created a weapon. And he was about to prove that pen, or in this case an engraver's tool, truly is mightier than the sword. But the British weren't going to take this lying down. October 1770, 7 months after the shooting, the soldiers are finally going to trial. And in one of the most shocking twists in American history, the lawyer defending them is none other than John Adams, future founding father, future president, and current patriot hero. Think about that for a second. The same John Adams who despised British tyranny, who would sign the Declaration of Independence, who would help birth a nation, that John Adams just agreed to defend the men everyone in Boston once hanged. Why would he do it? Here's what Adams himself said. It's of more importance to community that innocence should be protected than it is that guilt should be punished. Noble words. But was it really about justice? Or was Adams playing an even deeper game? Because here's what no one talks about. Adams defending the soldiers actually strengthened the patriot cause. Think about it. If the soldiers were convicted in a kangaroo court, Britain could claim colonial justice was a sham. But if they received a fair trial and were still convicted, or if they were acquitted despite the evidence, the propaganda value would be enormous. Adams was playing chess while everyone else played checkers. The trial became its own battleground, not just of facts but of narratives. The prosecution, led by Samuel Quincy, ironically a loyalist, and Robert Treat Paine, argued massacre, cold-blooded murder, British tyranny made flesh. They paraded witnesses who testified to the soldiers' brutality, their threats earlier that day, their intentional firing into an unarmed crowd. But Adams countered with a different story, self-defense. He described the crowd as a motley rabble of saucy boys, Negroes and mulattoes, Irish Teagues and outlandish Jack Tars. Yes, those were his actual word. Racist, classist, designed to dehumanize the victims and make the jury sympathize with the soldiers. He painted a picture of a terrified squad surrounded by a violent mob, acting in fear for their lives. Here's where it gets psychological. Adams introduced the concept of reasonable doubt in a way that would echo through American jurisprudence forever. Could you convict a man to death if there was even a possibility he feared for his life? He wasn't just defending 8 soldiers. He was establishing a legal precedent that would define American justice. The evidence Adams presented was damning to the colonists. Testimonies revealed that the crowd had indeed been violent, threatening, armed with clubs, that someone in the crowd may have yelled fire, causing the soldiers to believe their officer had given the order. that the whole situation was chaotic, confusing, terrifying. The verdict? 6 soldiers acquitted completely, 2 convicted of manslaughter, branded on the thumb, then released. No one hanged, no one imprisoned. By the law, justice had been served. But here's the thing. The patriots didn't lose, not even close, because while the soldiers walked free, the narrative of the massacre only grew stronger. The acquittal became proof not of innocence, but of a rigged system. Even when British soldiers murder colonists in the streets, they faced no real consequences. The trial wasn't the end of the propaganda war, it was fuel for the fire. Samuel Adams, John's cousin and the real propaganda mastermind, ensured that March 5th became an annual day of remembrance. Every year, speeches. Every year, ceremonies. Every year, the story retold. The Boston Massacre entered the colonial consciousness not as a complex incident of mob violence and panicked soldiers, but as a symbol of British oppression. And John Adams? He later wrote that defending those soldiers was one of the best pieces of service I ever rendered my country. Not because he won, but because he proved that even in the face of tyranny, colonial justice could be fair. It made the patriot cause look righteous, reasonable, civilized. While the British were the murderers, the colonists were the ones who believed in law and order. Do you see the brilliance of this? Both sides claimed victory. The soldiers went free. The patriots got their martyrs. And the propaganda machine kept churning, churning, churning. But the question remains, who really won that trial? The soldiers who avoided the noose? John Adams who defended the rule of law? Or Samuel Adams and Paul Revere, who ensured that regardless of the verdict, the Boston Massacre would live forever in colonial memory as an act of British brutality? Here's your answer. The trial never mattered. The verdict never mattered. All that mattered was the story people believed, and the story people believed was written in blood-red ink on March 5th, 1770, and spread through an engraving that showed exactly what the patriots wanted everyone to see. Justice was served, and propaganda won anyway. 5 dead colonists. That was the cost of the Boston Massacre. Compare that to other British colonial incidents. The Peterloo Massacre in England in 1819, 15 dead, hundreds wounded. The Amritsar Massacre in India in 1919, nearly 400 dead. So why did 5 deaths in Boston become the catalyst for revolution, while other bloodier incidents led to, what? Protests that faded, reforms that came too late. Because the Boston Massacre was never really about the deaths. It was about what those deaths represented, or more accurately, what they were made to represent. Watch how it happens. March 5th, 1770, the shooting. March 26th, Revere's Engraving published. April 1770, copies reached New York, Philadelphia. May 1770, copies reached Virginia, the Carolinas. By summer, every colonial leader from Boston to Savannah knows the facts of the massacre, and the facts they know are the facts Paul Revere engraved. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The Boston Massacre didn't happen in isolation. It came after the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, the seizure of John Hancock's ship, the arrival of British troops in Boston in 1768. But none of those incidents gave the Patriots what they desperately needed, a visual symbol of British tyranny. You can't make a martyr out of a tax dispute. You can make a martyr out of a dead body in the snow. Samuel Adams understood this better than anyone. He organized the first Boston Massacre commemorations in 1771, exactly 1 year after the shooting. Annual orations, delivered in the Old South Meeting House, where speakers would invoke the victims' names, describe their deaths in vivid detail, and connect their sacrifice to the larger cause of liberty. Listen to this excerpt from a 1772 oration by Joseph Warren, who would later die at Bunker Hill. That ever memorable night, our streets are stained with the blood of our brethren, brethren slaughtered by the hands of villainous British soldiers. Villainous, British, soldiers. 3 words that sum up the entire propaganda strategy. Not confused soldiers, not scared soldiers facing a mob. Villainous, British, soldiers. The Boston Massacre became a before and after moment in colonial consciousness. Before, we're British subjects with grievances. After, we're Americans being occupied by a foreign army. That shift in identity, that's what the propaganda achieved. And watch how the narrative expands. The massacre gets connected to the quartering act. See, this is what happens when you force colonists to house soldiers. It gets connected to taxation without representation. See, this is what happens when we have no say in Parliament. It gets connected to every grievance, every complaint, every frustration. The massacre becomes the symbol that ties everything together. By 1773, when the Boston Tea Party happens, the colonists aren't just protesting a tax on tea, they're protesting an entire system of oppression that murders them in the streets. See how one event becomes the lens through which all other events are viewed? That's propaganda, working exactly as intended. Here's something even more fascinating. The British tried their own propaganda campaign. Loyalist newspapers published accounts claiming the colonists were the aggressors. They emphasized the acquittal of the soldiers. They pointed out the mob violence, and it failed completely. Why? Because they were too late. Revere got there first. The patriot narrative was already established, already spread, already believed. In propaganda, the first narrative out of the gate has an enormous advantage. Everything that comes after is framed as spin, as lies, as cover-up. The British learned a lesson they would repeat throughout the Revolution. They were fighting a traditional war while the patriots were fighting a propaganda war. And in propaganda wars, controlling the narrative matters more than controlling the ground. By 1775, when shots rang out at Lexington and Concord, the colonists didn't need convincing. They already knew what the British were capable of. They'd seen it in an engraving. They'd heard it in annual orations. They'd internalized it as truth. The Boston Massacre had done its job. It had transformed subjects into rebels. 5 deaths. But those 5 deaths, properly packaged and endlessly repeated, created thousands of soldiers willing to die for independence. That's the power of propaganda. That's the power of narrative. That's the power of making people believe that their cause is just, their enemies are evil, and their sacrifice means something. The American Revolution didn't start at Lexington and Concord. It started in Paul Revere's workshop on a copper plate with an engraver's tool. Everything that followed was just follow-through. Do you understand now? The battles were necessary, but the propaganda made them inevitable. So what did we just witness? A masterclass in manufacturing consent, in shaping reality, in weaponizing narrative so effectively that it toppled an empire and birthed a nation. The Boston Massacre killed far more than 5 colonists. It killed the idea that truth matters more than perception. It killed the notion that facts speak for themselves. It killed any remaining belief that people form opinions based on careful consideration of evidence rather than emotional reaction to powerful images. And those deaths? They echo across every century since. Think about the Spanish-American War, sparked by the USS Maine explosion, and the rallying cry, "Remember the Maine!" The image of the destroyed ship in newspapers created the same visceral outrage Revere's engraving did. Never mind that the explosion was probably an accident. The image said otherwise. Think about World War I recruitment posters. "I want you for U.S. Army." Simple, visual, emotional. Uncle Sam pointing at you, making it personal. Same playbook, different century. Think about the photograph of the napalm girl running from her burning village in Vietnam. That single image turned American public opinion against the war more effectively than 1,000 anti-war speeches. One picture. Everything changed. Think about the fall of the Berlin Wall, broadcast live on television. The images of people chipping away at concrete, flooding through checkpoints, embracing in celebration. Those images didn't just document the fall of communism, they accelerated it. Other Soviet nations saw the footage and thought, we can do this too. Think about 9/11. The images of planes hitting towers played over and over and over. Those images justified 2 decades of war, trillions in spending, fundamental changes to American society. Would the response have been the same if we only read about the attacks? Or did the images seal our fate? Now think about your phone, your social media feed. The images you see every single day, carefully curated, algorithmically optimized to trigger emotional responses. How many of them are today's version of Revere's engraving? How many show you a carefully constructed version of events designed to make you feel a certain way, believe a certain narrative, take a certain action? Here's the uncomfortable truth. We never left 1770. We just got better tools. Paul Revere had copper plates and hand distribution. We have Photoshop and global instant distribution. Revere had to convince people the engraving was accurate. We have deep fakes that are virtually indistinguishable from reality. Revere's propaganda took weeks to spread through the colonies. Ours goes viral in minutes. But the psychology, the techniques, exactly the same. Make it visual, make it emotional, make it simple. Get there first, remove complexity, create clear villains and heroes, use color psychology, repeat endlessly. Make people feel like they're part of something bigger. Give them a reason to be outraged. The Boston Massacre teaches us something terrifying. You don't need to change reality to change the world. You just need to change what people believe about reality. 5 colonists died on March 5th, 1770. That's a tragedy. But it's not a massacre. It's not organized tyranny. It's not a systematic campaign of violence. It's chaos and confusion and fear on both sides, ending in the worst possible way. But that's not the story that got told. That's not the story that spread. That's not the story that launched a revolution. The story that got told was simpler, more powerful, more useful. And useful stories, even when they're not entirely true, are the stories that survive. So here's your final question, and it's the most important one. What are you believing right now that's been manufactured just as carefully as Revere manufactured outrage? What images have you seen? What narratives have you absorbed? What emotional responses have been engineered in you without you ever questioning the source, the motive, the truth behind the truth? Because make no mistake, the propaganda war didn't end in 1770. It never ends. It just evolves. Gets more sophisticated, more targeted, more effective. The Boston Massacre proves something that every government, every movement, every advertiser, every person with an agenda has known ever since. Control the story, control the people. Paul Revere understood that. Do you? The massacre lasted 8 minutes. The trial lasted days. The commemoration lasted years. But the lesson lasts forever. Question everything. Scrutinize sources. Understand that what you're seeing has been shaped by someone with an objective. Sometimes that objective is noble. Sometimes it's not. But it's always there. The American Revolution was fought with muskets and cannons, but it was won with engravings and pamphlets. Remember that the next time you see an image that makes you feel something strongly, that makes you absolutely certain you know what happened, that makes you want to share it immediately without checking the facts, because that's exactly how it's supposed to work. That's exactly what Paul Revere taught us. And 255 years later, we're still falling for it. The truth didn't start a revolution. A well-told lie did. And that's the most honest thing we can say about the Boston Massacre.